Welcome back to Telltale Books. The result of my posting a video for Manly Wade Wellman's recent birthday anniversary brought a comment that I should review one of the stories from the John Thunstone series that Wellman wrote, starting the first of the stories was published in November of 1943. So I thought, what the heck, why not? And I did go and read that very first story, mainly because I didn't even know who John Thunstone was. I didn't know what the John Thunstone series was before this person requested it. And so I thought, well, okay, I'll look into it. I'm very new to Manly Wade Wellman. So far, I read one of the John the Balladeer stories, absolutely loved it, did a video review of that. I read, for his birthday anniversary, I read his second published story, the earliest one that I could get a hold of, Back to the Beast, which was, it was okay. It was kind of like almost like a rehashing of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but not quite as good as Robert Louis Stevenson did. So it was good, but I didn't love it. So anyway, the comment was made that somebody wanted me to read one of the John Thunstone series, and I did. And it was good. I have to be honest, I liked Oh Ugly Bird better than this one. The first John Thunstone story was called The Third Cry to Legba. It was published in Weird Tales magazine in November of 1943. So this is before John the Balladeer got started. As a matter of fact, I kind of looked up when the rest of the Thunstone series was published. The majority of them were published before Wellman started writing John the Balladeer. Now, that's not saying that because it came later that John the Balladeer is better written. But there may be a little of that involved here. There may be some improvement in his writing that happened after writing the bulk of the John Thunstone stories. Anyway, in general, the John Thunstone series, it's about a paranormal investigator or a cult investigator. This is a pretty common, popular type of story at this time in the 1940s. I don't think it's as popular these days, although there is an occult detective magazine in publication right now. So it hasn't lost all of its popularity, but back in the 1940s, this sort of story was very popular, and actually dating back, I did a little research. I didn't write notes, though, so I'm trying to rely on memory, which is a really bad idea. Anyway, the occult detective type stories date back into the 1800s. I think it was the 1820s that somebody wrote the first ones, 1820s or 1840s, kind of back in Edgar Allan Poe's day. And then there were others who wrote such series after that, including J. Sheridan Le Fanu. I don't know if I pronounced that name right, but I took a stab. Of course, William Hope Hodgson had a very well-known series, but that was actually... Hodgson was asked to write his series. I'm struggling to remember the name of his detective stories, Hodgson. And my mind's drawing a blank. I know the name of it. I'm just drawing a blank right now. It's been a long month. Anyway, William Hope Hodgson wrote a series, but I read where that was actually where Algernon Blackwood was writing a series about an occult detective, and he decided to stop writing his series. And so the editor of the magazine where Blackwood was publishing these went to William Hope Hodgson and said, hey, would you come back and write an occult detective series? So Hodgson complied and started a very popular series of his own. And then in the 1920s with Weird Tales, you had, again with names, Seabury Quinn wrote a whole series that became very well known about Jules de Grandin, again, murdering the name, I'm sure, something like that. And the Jules de Grandin series was very popular in Weird Tales from the 1920s all the way into the 1940s. Seabury Quinn kind of slowed down the series about the time that Manly Wade Wellman started the John Thunstone series. So I can only speculate, but I think maybe the Weird Tales editorial staff asked Wellman to jump in and write and come up with something to continue that very popular style of story. Because, of course, the paranormal and the occult and seances and stuff were very popular in the early part of the 20th century. I don't know why, but people were just really, really into that subject. And so a series of stories about detectives investigating it. Of course, Sherlock Holmes is probably the most popular detective, but even though Conan Doyle was heavily into the occult, in Sherlock Holmes, any occult type situations were always exposed as mundane explanations. Like the Hound of the Baskervilles wasn't really a devil dog, it was just a really big, really mean dog. So there was nothing supernatural about the Hound of the Baskervilles, which it kind of seems strange considering the popularity of occult detectives and Conan Doyle's interest in occult subjects, that he never really stepped over that line and brought true occult into the Sherlock Holmes series. But he didn't. But he brought in these occult themes all the time into some of the Sherlock Holmes, not all the time, but into some of the Sherlock Holmes stories, he brought in occult themes. So it was very popular. The occult and occult detectives were very popular all the way up through the 1940s. Seabury Quinn did not completely stop the Jules de Grandin stories, but he did slow down a lot in the 1940s. And in 1943, then, Manly Wade Wellman started the John Thunstone stories. Now, Third Cry to Legba actually mentions the character of Jules de Grandin by name. Therefore, the entire John Thunstone series is set in the same fictional world as Jules de Grandin. And I think that was done on purpose. I think it probably was meant by the editor to be kind of a successor to Jules de Grandin, since Seabury Quinn was winding down with it. So anyway, the Third Cry to Legba specifically has the investigator coming across a voodoo cult, and Thunstone is very interested in this one woman, and so is the leader of the voodoo cult. This voodoo leader is trying to get the woman to become a part of the cult, and John Thunstone wants to save her because he's kind of smitten with her. And that's the basic story. If you're looking for a blockbuster, this is a short story. If you're looking for a blockbuster, this one isn't it. I haven't read any of the other John Thunstone stories. I want to read more of them because just seeing what Wellman has done in other works of his has led me to believe that it probably gets better from here. Not to say this is a bad story. This is a very good story. It's well written, It's got an interesting plot, interesting characters, very well done for a short story. But it doesn't like blow you away. There's nothing cosmic like Lovecraft happening in this story. Although it kind of goes there, it doesn't go all the way there. I don't want to say too much more because I'm already getting close to spoiling this for you by what I've said. So here's the thing with what Wellman did with John Thunstone. Okay, that even though this first story is not this great blockbuster of a story, Wellman did something different with his occult investigator that, to the best of my knowledge, the previous ones didn't do, at least not to the degree that Wellman did. And that is to base the events of the investigations in these stories on real legend, real like urban legends, or in this case a voodoo legend about this god named Legba. Wellman is said, and I get this from reading a little bit about the John Thunstone through the internet. Wellman is said to have gone much farther to use real world accounts. I mean, whether these counts are really true or not, I'm skeptical. But he used real world accounts to base his stories on, to base events on in the John Thunstone series. I'm led to believe that others who wrote about occult investigators did not do that. The others were wholly fictional. Wellman pulled it out of the newspapers or record books or wherever sources he dug into to get these stories, which makes it a little more down to earth, I guess you'd say. Not quite so fantastical, a little more connected to our real world. So, of course, the occult detective stories, I say that they're not as popular today, but they've kind of morphed. They've changed a lot. I mean, successors to series like John Thunstone and Jules de Grandin are as widely varying as Kolchak the Night Stalker, Scooby-Doo, and the X-Files. The X-Files is probably your modern 21st century style of, I know X-Files was mostly in the 1990s, but it's very much updated to take into account the kinds of legends we have today with UFOs and government conspiracies and all kinds of wild things like that. Much more current types of urban legends are used in X-Files than what you find in the old occult detectives. But it's the same basic idea, really. Detectives, in the case of X-Files, FBI agents going out and investigating these unexplained stories that other people are writing off as pure fantasy, and within the story they find some truth behind it. So this is part of a rich tradition, and Wellman stands smack in between our modern style occult detectives and the classic occult detectives, with a series where he did a lot, I'm led to believe he did a lot deeper research. So, Third Cry to Legba is not going to get a top tail, but it is going to get my recommendation. If you like that kind of story, if you like the X-Files, if you like the Night Stalker, if you like Jules de Grandin, if you like the one that was done by Algernon Blackwood or the one done by William Hope Hodgson, then you should give John Thunstone a try. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Somebody advise me if I'm murdering that name too. But that's another Manly Wade Wellman, and these three Manly Wade Wellman stories have prompted me to want to add Wellman to my deep dive investigations. I am going to go back and start from the beginning. Well, I did already go back and read the earliest one I could get a hold of. So now moving on to the next one. Soon, I don't know exactly when, but soon I'll move on to the next earliest Wellman stories, which is number 3. It was published in 1931 in Wonder Stories Quarterly and called When Planets Clashed, because Wellman actually wrote a lot of straight out science fiction, especially in the 1930s. So I'm looking forward to that. This is the early space opera, gonzo science with rays all over the place and strange forces creating their super science, the kind of stuff that Campbell and Williamson and Hamilton did. Manly Wade Wellman was in there doing the same kinds of thing. And I kind of like that. It's the Star Wars, Buck Rogers kind of science fiction. So I'm going to read that one next and report on it, and then keep going through. After When Planets Clash is one called Faithful Footsteps, which was actually published in Mind Magic magazine. I'm not familiar with that magazine. I don't know if I can get a hold of that one. The Discman of Jupiter is back to Wonder Stories. The Invading Asteroid. Rebels of the Moon, At the Bend of the Trail, Outlaws of Callisto, The Horror Undying. That's definitely a Weird Tales story. So quite a variety to his work, and I'll be going through that and discussing that in the near future. I hope you'll come back and join me for that. Like us and subscribe to us, and keep watching for more Manly Wade Wellman, because it seems to be popular with a lot of people, and I'm liking it pretty much. And all the other authors that I've been doing deep dives into lately. And I'll see you again.